into the Fabricum alarm codes section. And what I want to talk about here are some formulas that work with text. Because sometimes you in your databases where you work, or HR might send you a file, or someone might send you a file, and you have got to pull things out of these strings. I used an example here of alarm codes and hire dates for employees. And I want to see what extension they're at, what floor they're on, what their birthday month is, what their employee ID is, and all of that is contained in this mumbo jumbo over here. From a database, from like an HR database, because again, we know databases pull strings of text out and not what we really want unless we write reports. So how do we get the floor extension for this person in this column when it's attached to this string of text? Okay, so I'm going to make this bigger for you guys so you can see it a little bit better. And I want the alarm or the floor extension, which is the first 3 numbers in this little code that comes out of the database, right? So I want that 425, that 327, those numbers to appear in this extension column. So how I do that is I use a function called left. And what left does is it pulls a string that you want, however many characters, from the left side of a string of text, and then puts it wherever you are. So start at the left side and pull how many, and that's what I want. So I know in this alarm code string here that the first 3 numbers are what I want. So I'm going to type in my little cell. We always start a function or formula with an equal sign. So I'm going to type the equal sign, and then I'm going to type left. And as I type it, you can see the function appear here. So you can just double click it, and it opens the argument for you to start your formula. The first thing it's asking for is what text am I looking at? And you can see that it says left, and then it says what's the text, and then the number of characters. So I'm going to say the text is in A2. It's in cell A2, column A, cell 2. All right. So A2 is where my text is. So what am I looking at, and how many am I pulling? Once I have that text number in, I do a comma to do the next argument. And it says how many characters, what's the number of characters you want me to pull? Well, I know that it's 1, 2, 3, right? So from the left side, pull 3 characters. And then I do a close parentheses to end my argument. So what we just did was use the left function. It told what string of text to look at, which is in A2. And then the third one, or the 3, is for how many characters to pull. And then I'll hit the enter, and you'll see that we have 425 being pulled from this string of text. Now, because of using a relative cell reference here, and what that means, relative means when you copy it, it's relative to where you copy it. So when I copy this down, instead of it being A2, it'll be A3, A4, A5. So a relative cell reference means that I'm using relative to where I copy it. If it was an absolute cell reference with $signs in front of it, that would mean that if I copy that formula down, it would still always reference cell A2, which is not what I want. So I use the relative cell reference, which just says move it down as you copy it. So now I can click on this very right bottom dot here on the cell and drag it down all the way to the bottom. And now it'll copy the formula all the way down to grab those extension numbers for all of those individuals. All right.
Before you go on, my thought was, when you typed in the formula, you typed LEFT in caps. Does it have to be in caps?
No. So if I wanted to go here and say equal LEFT, it still does the same thing. And so I'll just double click that left, and it's still the same thing.
Okay.
Okay.
So caps aren't critical.
No, caps are not critical when you're dealing with a function, because when you double click it, it's going to capitalize it anyway. Okay. So now, okay, now let's look at the floor number. So I'm going to do this function again so we get a little bit of practice with it. The floor number is the first one. All right, so we're going to do the exact same function with just 1 character this time. So we practice again. So in the floor, which is I2, we're going to begin with an equal sign. And we're going to start typing left. And this time I'll do it like Sandy said, I'll just start with lowercase letters. And when that function pops up down here with the IntelliSense, I'll just double click it. and it opens my argument. If you don't want to double click that, you just simply need to type left and open the parentheses. It does the same thing. All right, so left, we're going to look at the same string of text, which is found in A2. So I can just click on cell A2. And again, my next argument, separated by a comma, will be the number of characters. So this time the floor number is that very first number. So I only want it to pull 1. I'll close the parentheses and I'll hit enter, and it pulls the 4 from the string of text. I can just copy that down all the way. And again, it will do it for all of the other formulas because that reference is relative. All right. Any questions so far on that left? All right, now we're going to do its sister equation, the right. Okay, so this time with the alarm column, all right, I know that in this jumbled mess of text that the birthday month for the employee is found in the last 3 letters. Okay, so you'll notice APR for April, MAR for March, AUG for August, etc. So I want to pull that person's birthday month over here. So instead of using left, which comes from the left side of a string of text, this time we're going to come from the right hand side of a string of text. So instead of typing in left, I'm going to type in equals right. Okay, so left is the other function, right is this one. So this time it's going to come from the right side of the string of text to come in how many characters. Okay, so I'm going to look at the text in E2, same formula format. What text am I looking at and how many characters do you want? So E2 is my string of text, comma, yes. And then how many do I want? Well, I know that it's APR, so that's 3 characters. So I just want it to pull the last 3 characters in that string of text. So I'll type in 3 and close my parentheses and I'll hit enter. And you'll notice that it pulls the APR from over here. And then I will drag that down to pull the rest of the months. Now we're going to practice again with that a little bit. Okay. All right. So let's do it again. Right. Let's use right again. So we understand that left comes from the left side of a string of text and right comes from the right side. So for the employee ID, the code in column A, that all that jumbled mess, we have the last 5 digits are the employee ID number. Okay, so that 15210 here, that 49612, 51276. So the last 5 digits here are the employee ID number. So how do we get that from the column A into column K and just those numbers? I don't want the rest of that text. So it's coming from the right side of that string. So we're going to use the right function to pull it out. So I'm going to type equals right, open parentheses. The text that we're looking at is found in A2, cell A2. So we're going to make sure it says A2. We type a comma to separate the argument because the next argument is how many characters do you want me to pull? So from the right-hand side of that string, we're pulling 5 characters in. So I'm going to type 5 and then close my parentheses to end that argument.
But what about Linda that has 6 characters?
Well, it would, but I know that I only need 5. So that P1 is part of the other category that we're looking at.
Oh, okay.
Right. So only those 5 numbers are the employee ID. Okay. And if, for instance, Sandy, it was 6, you could make it pull 6. And in that particular one, let's say we went down to number 4, we would just double click and make that one 6 instead of 5.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Yep. So if it did perhaps end up being 6 for another person, we could just adjust that column. All right. And we drilled down, we filled out the rest of that column. And so now we have the employee ID from that jumbled mess in the employee ID section. All right, so let me stop for a second and just ask, are there any questions about left and right? Because Sandy, what I don't want to happen is you to put I'm in the weeds.
Not yet. I'll let you know.
Okay.
I'll let you know. So if you had put 6 to
Uh-huh.
capture that 1 and that 0, it would have actually captured the letter P in the first place, right? It doesn't know a number from a letter.
Right. It doesn't. It's going to characters. Like if you say 5 characters, it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and pull them. All right. If you say 7, it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and pull it out. So it's not a character is a number, a letter, a symbol, anything. So just to use your example, Sandy, if I knew, for instance, in row 4 that Linda's employee ID was in fact 151276, then I could click right here in this cell and change that 5 to a 6, and it would update that formula.
Oh, in that cell. Okay.
And then I'll copy it down to this other one because that one has 6 numbers as well. Right? So you could do that in theory, but I know from that text it's just a 5.
Cool.
So now we've used left, right. So you're thinking, okay, Richard, we can pull from the left side of a string. We can pull from the right side of a string, but what happens if it's all in the middle? Well, there's a function for that too. It's called mid, M-I-D. And what MID does is does the same thing. What string of text are you looking for? But it adds one extra argument. So left and right just said, what am I looking at and how many do you want me to pull? Because it starts at the end of the candles, right? So the middle function has 3 arguments. It says, what string of text am I looking at? Where do I start? And how many do you want me to pull, right? Because since it's in the middle, it needs to know where you want it to start. So I know for this next example that the employee category 1 is the 4th character, 4th and 5th character here. So OO, SA, SA, PS, SA, etc. Right? So I know it's those 2 characters. So it's the 4th character in and then pull 2 of them, right? So that's how we build our argument. So in that J2 or L2 cell, we're going to type the equal sign to start our function. And I'm going to type MID because it's the mid function, left, right, mid. And an open parentheses to start my argument. And if you look right below that, it says text, start number, and then number of characters. So it's got 3 arguments. What text? Where do I start? And how many do you want? Okay. So my string of text is going to be an A2. So I can either type A2 or click on it and then do a comma to do the next argument. The next argument is what number do I start with? What character do I start with? Well, we know it's that O. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So type a 4 to say start at the 4th character, comma, and then I want you to pull that O and the very next one. So pull 2 characters out. So a 2. So it's going to say A2, comma, 4, comma, 2. Look at A2, start with the 4th character and pull 2 characters out. I'm going to end my parentheses.
Oh, cool.
And then I'll hit enter and you'll see that it pulled OO from that employee. And then I'll click and drag it all the way down. Right? So we're going to practice one more time with that mid, and this time we're going to start at the 6th one. So that 2nd category is that 5th and 6th character, that MP or that P4, P1, etc. So let's practice it one more time. So if you're coming from the left side of a text, it's the left function. The right side of a text, it's the right function. But if it's somewhere in the middle, it's the mid function. And so I'll do MID equals MID, open parentheses. Now, my first argument is what text am I looking at? And we know that it's in this first column. So A2, comma, and I'll shrink this down just a bit. Let me shrink it for you guys so you can see that there. So equals mid, A2, comma, the number of character to start with. So I know it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're going to start with the 6th character, a comma to move to the next argument, and then pull 2 characters again. So A2, comma, 6, comma, 2.
Cool.
All right, and then I'll close my parentheses and I'll hit enter to pull those out. And then I'll just drag it down for the rest of the cells. All right, everybody see that? We're good. So are we good with left, middle, and right. Okay. All right. I got a thumbs up. I'm good. All right. So now I want to show you something that sometimes happens when people enter data. All right. A lot of databases will let you pull an Excel spreadsheet out, with all the information on it. But sometimes staff make mistakes and they put a space before the first name or a space after the last name, or they forget to hit, So if you'll look in this particular example, and I'll make it bigger for you, I put spaces in front of all these names, right? Like somebody made a mistake. I hit the space key and typed David, then I hit tab and typed Ortiz and accidentally hit a space key. Well, there's a function that will help you out here, because the thing that happens is that a space, like I just mentioned to Sandy, a space is considered a character. It does not have to look at numeric or text. It just looks at characters. An apostrophe, a comma, a space, all of those are considered characters in Excel. So if you put a space before a name and you start to alphabetize your list, that space is going to appear at the very top of your list or the very bottom, depending on how you do it. And you're going to think David Ortiz is not in your database because he's appearing at the bottom and not in the D section. So those mistakes sometimes can cause us issues, especially if we're looking at 1,000 people. So how do we fix that with spaces? Here's how we fix it. There is a function that's called trim, T-R-I-M. And what it does is it trims spaces, unwanted spaces before or after a string of text. So if I hit the equal sign and I start typing TRIM, there's my trim function. So open parentheses, and there's only one argument for this. It's just what text you want me to trim, right? I don't have to know about anything else, just what text is it. So I want to trim text B2. All right, and so I'll close my argument. So all it is trim and the cell reference to whichever text it is. And I hit enter, and notice that it now has removed that space before the word David. All right, so when I trim it down, we again have no spaces before those names. All right, so I'll do that one more time with the last name. So trim function is it will trim before or after any unwanted spaces before or after a string of text. So all I have to do is type the trim function and then whatever text you want me to trim. So in this case, it's in cell C2. So I'm going to type my equal sign, TRIM, open parentheses, and then the text would be in cell C2, close parentheses to end my argument. And then once I hit the enter key, it trims that extra space before the word of their last name. So I'm just going to drag that down.
Okay, I just got my money's worth.
Did you? Apparently you have you have some data issue there.
Oh yeah, I do that all the time, and I do these sorts, and then you go, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense, and you realize someone stuck a weird blank space in there. So
Exactly.
then I manually move everything and resort everything. So.
So now I want, right before we move to the next exercise, I'll show you something to be careful of when you do that. Okay. So let's get to these proper names, and then I'll do that. So I'm only going to do the first. I won't do the first, last, and birthday because it's the same function. So let's say people are typing into your database. We have these characters here, and they've typed a name in, but they type them with all lowercase. That drives me insane. Or they'll forget to do the first name, but they'll do the last name, or they'll forget to do the last name and do the first name. As a data person, it drives me up the wall. So if I have to present a spreadsheet to someone, here's something I use. There's a function called proper. And what proper does is it capitalizes a string of text to the proper case. So a person's name should be capitalized first, right? So if I do in cell A12, if I type equals proper and the open parentheses, again, it's only asking me which text. I'm going to make reference to the N that we just did, N2. So N2 and then close parentheses. So again, proper and just which text you want me to make proper. And when I hit OK, David is now capitalized like it should be. All right, so I'm
Wait,
just gonna,
could you show the formula again, proper, what was, oh,
I'm,
where's,
all right, I'll do it one more time for the last name. So it's equal proper, open parentheses, and it's just the cell reference to the text you want to make proper. That's all it is. So my cell reference here would be O2, because that's where the last name is. So I
oh,
just type
right
O2
there.
and then close. So proper and what text? Does that make sense, Sandy?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And so when I hit enter, that's what I got. All right, I got Ortiz. So I'm gonna copy that down. And now I have the first and last name proper like it should be. Now, here is the catch that some people come into. So Sandy, let's use your example. You have to copy and paste and fix everything. So let's say we use this formula for trim, right? Well, all of the formulas that we used are related to cell B2, right? So I did B2 when I trimmed the text. I referenced B2. We see that here. So I referenced this cell. And then when I made it proper, I referenced that cell, right? So everything is connecting via a formula. Here's what happens. Well, okay, so now I've made these proper, so I don't need this cell anymore, right? I've got what I need. I've trimmed it. I've done what I need. So I need to delete what I don't need, right? This is what happens. People delete this information. Now look what happens. The other stuff disappears. The reason why is because you reference the cell. So if that cell changes, everything else changes. So a lot of people delete it, not realizing that, oh my God, now I've lost everything else. So here's a trick in Excel. When you copy and paste something, right? So let's say here's the copy that I want. Here's exactly what I want. When you copy it, you hit Control C or you go up here and hit copy. When you paste that information, what you need to do is go up to the paste section and just don't paste it. Go into this arrow where it's giving you a bunch of paste options. And what you're going to do is just paste the values, right? Not the formulas, because if you paste, usually it's pasting formulas. You just want to paste values, which is this very first one under paste values. And if you paste values, all you did was paste the answers. You don't copy the formula with it. So now when I delete this row, these don't change, right? So you copy only the values if you want to make adjustments. So do your formulas, make it right, and then copy and paste the values. So when you delete everything else, it's not going to congruently change your formula. Okay, Sandy, you got that face. Do you need me to do it again?
I'm gonna turn my camera off.
No, I like to know that people get it.
Why aren't they up there under C2 and 3? Oh, there they are. Okay.
Yep. So what, and that's what I'm, yep. So if I delete this, this
I get that.
disappears. Yep.
That I got. I
So
didn't do it the right way.
you would copy and paste here. So let's say my final answers were these here. Then I would copy them and then paste their value. So what I did was copy this, and you'll know that in these cells is that formula we wrote, right? So when I paste it over here, I go up to the paste button and I click on that arrow and I go to paste values, and I paste the values, because what you're doing is you're only pasting the answers to that formula. You're not using the formula. If you do it any other way, if I paste the formulas and all that good stuff, I'm actually pasting that formula and I'm just recreating what I just tried to fix. So only paste the values, which means the answers and no formula. So when I delete the formulas, this doesn't change. Right? Does that make sense to everybody?
No.
Okay. And Sandy, if you get confused, just email me. I will hop on a Zoom call and be show me your screen.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so let's move into the V and H lookup. A lot of people ask for the V and H lookup. So all of VLOOKUP stands for is vertical lookup. So it's going up and down. It's looking in columns up and down. And the H lookup just means H horizontal. So it's looking left and right in columns. So let's practice the formula for a VLOOKUP. So I created a fake table here, and let me make it bigger for you guys. So I've created a fake table here of a small set of data, and let's say these are employee records or client records or whatever your type industry is. Let me get a drink of water, I'm sorry. And you want to look up all the information on a particular person. So you can create a lookup formula that will do that for you. So we're going to practice this several times. So what my boss might say is, Richard, I want to be able to type the person's last name in, and then it pull all that person's information, their first name, their department, their extension, and when they were hired. Okay. So the way I do that is I create a VLOOKUP that will pull everything here. Okay. Now with a VLOOKUP, here's the trick, is that the information that you're going to look up, so like I want to look up the last name to pull everything else, always has to be in the first column. All right, that's the trick, and that's why a lot of people get caught up. For some reason, the way the formula in the background works, the lookup value, which is, again, in my example, the last name, it has got to be in the first column of your table. Okay. So I'm going to put the formula. I want to be able to type into last name, but I want first name, department, extension, and date hired to pull. So what I'm going to do is type my lookup formula inside of cell D2. Every formula starts with a
Equals.
an equal sign. All right, so I've got equals, and my function is VLOOKUP. All right, so I'll click here and it'll start my my function. Down here is my formula. All right, this is my syntax for writing this function. It's going to be the lookup value, the table that I'm looking in, the column that I'm pulling, and then if I want it to be an exact match or not, right? That means range lookup. So whether the match is an equal match, a perfect match, or not, a very similar match. So in this case, I want all of my matches to be identical, right? So what is my lookup value? Well, my lookup value is going to be the value that I type in cell C2, right? So first argument is what am I looking at? What do you want me to look for? So I'm going to click cell C2, and this is where that relative and absolute cell reference comes in. When I copy this formula somewhere else, I am never going to change that cell C2. Cell C2 will always be what I'm looking for, that person's last name. So as I copy this formula, I want to make sure that that C2 reference never changes. So what I do to make it an absolute cell reference is you type $C $2. All right, that says when you copy this, cell C2 stays absolutely the same. $sign in front of the column, $sign in front of the row. All right, so I'm looking at cell C2. Then I put in my comma. My next argument is going to be, what table am I looking at? Well, I'm looking at employee data. So I'm going to highlight all of this. I'm sorry, I got it wrong. I'm highlighting this, not the column headers. And I named it employee data. If you want to know about naming cells, we can do it again in another class. But I named this table emp data so to be quicker. But you could easily type in C7 colon G15. That would still be the same range. You don't have to use the employee data. I just happen to name it because it's easier for me. So you could type in C7 colon G15, which means from cell C7 all the way through G15. Or you can highlight it all three ways. That's perfectly fine. So we're looking at cell C2 in the table employee data from cell C7 to C15, comma, my index match, since I'm looking for the first name, it means what column do you want me to pull this information from? So column 1 is what I'm looking for. So it would be column 2 that I'm pulling from, right? So I'm going to type in a 2, comma, and then it's going to ask me, what type of match do you want? If you type in true, it means it's an approximate match. So it's going to look for something that's similar to what you're asking for. If you type in false, it's going to have to be an exact match to what you typed. So I'm going to type in false and close my argument. So before I hit enter, let's walk through this one more time. Our function is Vlookup, and our first argument is, what am I looking at? So that argument is cell C2. That's what I'm looking at in this to look it up. Cell C2, and it's always going to be absolute. That value is never going to change when I copy this formula over here. So I want to make it absolute, and the way I do that is put dollar signs in front of the column and the row. Then put a comma to go into my next argument. My next argument is just saying, where is the information? What table or range of data am I looking at? And we know that our data is in C7 through G15. I named that range imp data, but you're welcome to type in C7 through G15. So where am I looking? What am I looking for? Where am I looking? Comma to start our next argument. And our next argument is, what column am I looking in? Where am I going to look? And so it's the second column of our data, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're looking in the second column for that first name. And then the last argument is whether it's true for an approximate match or false for an exact match. And in this case, we want exact matches. And I close my argument and I hit enter. And right now it says NA because there's nothing for it to look up. That's fine. So what I can do is type someone's last name, and I'll type Baker, and notice that it pulls Nancy into that first name column. Okay, so we don't want to have to do this all over again. So I'm just going to grab that cell D2.
My formula didn't work.
Say that again, Sandy.
My formula didn't work. Maybe because I typed in employee data in your sheet.
Yeah.
You had it, and then a 2 and then a false, and it says question mark name.
Question mark. Okay. All right. So up here, does your formula look like mine?
Oh, I did VLOOK. I forgot the word up. Yeah.
Let's see if it works now.
I still get name question mark.
Okay, so it says VLOOKUP parentheses
$C
dollar sign, comma. Instead of typing imp data, type in C7
Oh, let's do that.
colon G15. And then after that, it should be a comma, a 2, a comma, and false.
There you go, Nancy.
Okay, there you go, Nancy. All right, so I'm going to click on Nancy's name where I typed in cell D2, and I'm going to drag this formula all the way over to G2. Now it's going to say the same thing. That's okay, we're going to fix it. The reason why it says the same thing is because we made that cell C2 the exact copy, right? We said absolute, it's never going to change. So again, cell C2 stays the same, cell C2 stays the same, and then cell C2 stays the same, right? That's what an absolute cell reference means. I'll do it real quick for you. If I take these dollar signs away, watch what happens. When I copy it over, it's changing to cell D2 to cell E2, and I don't want that, right? So I'm going to go back to making this an absolute cell reference so that when it copies over, it still keeps cell C2 as my lookup value. So now that I've copied this over, all I have to do is change one thing, and that's the column that it's pulling from, because we said cell or column 2 in our first formula. So I go to department and I double click and I change this 2 right here to a 3, because now I want it to pull the third column of department data. Then here, I want to change that 2 to a 4 because I want it to pull the extension data. And then I change this number to a 5 because I want it to pull the date hired. And since that come out as a number, that just means all I have to do is go up here to my home tab
Yeah.
and change the number format to a short date. So now, anytime that I change that last name, so let's say now I want Davis, it pulls Rita Administration 2604 and 4/15/2009. So it will look up all of the information in that table that is associated with, let's say I change it to Ellis. Now it's Pamela Data Processing 21/4 and 32. So it looks up the values in that table. All right, so
This is going to save me so much time.
So let's practice it again. Let's do a lookup for this particular information. This is the let's say that we're looking up the tax rate for somebody based on their salary, right? So I want it to look in the income. So when I type a person's income, I want it to look in this table and pull back the tax rate that falls within these rates, right? So again, we can use Vlookup as our thing, because again, that value is looking in a table with the column, right? It's not a horizontal table, it's a vertical table. So I want to look up equal Vlookup, okay? And the first is, what is my lookup value? Well, my lookup value is B2, right? It's whatever income that I put in that cell. So cell B2, and again, we'll make that an absolute cell reference by doing $B, $2. Now we're not going to copy this one, so technically you don't have to. I just like to make it a practice, because if you do copy it somewhere, you don't have to go back and wonder what happened. So then we put a comma, and again, it's asking what table do you want me to look at? Well, my information starts in cell D2 and goes all the way to cell F7. Now this time I did not name the range, because again, Sandy, like you just did, you can type it in too. You don't have to name it. You can type in that cell range. So column D2 colon F7. So through F7, all of that data. Then I put my comma. And this time I'm going to type in F, which is my third column. So I need the 3, right? So F is my third column, 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to type in 3. This time I don't have to put a true or false, because it's looking at ranges. I want it to look at where this value is, right? So we're not going to worry about the match. I just need it to pull that third column's information. So I'm going to close my argument and I'll hit enter, and it tells me for 15,000, it falls within this range. So it's pulling 28%. So if I change, say it again.
This is Maribel.
Hey, Maribel.
I joined a little late. However, I wanted to ask you, is there a benefit as to naming the range, or just putting in the cells in themselves?
Yes. So my internet froze for a second. I'm sorry, y'all. Can you hear me now? Yes, there is a benefit for naming cells, because you can use that in formulas just like you can use a cell reference. So for instance, if I typed over here equals H2,
Yeah.
I can use H2, but if I name the cell like tax rate or something, then every time I want to reference that cell, I can just type in the name. It helps you manage the formulas a little bit better. It's a little bit more of an advanced concept, but I can go into the name manager and look at the names that I have associated with all of my sheets.
Okay.
And so it makes it easier to write formulas because you can look at what the names of those, and on separate sheets, you'll know exactly what it's referencing throughout the thing. I want to look at the tag. How did it know that 15 fell in between those two values? Because I didn't do the exact match, it's looking for that 15 inside of these ranges. So it looks for the lowest value against that range. So it's saying 27.3, it's got to be below that. So I'm gonna pull it here. It's a little bit more sophisticated than we are, Sarah. I just don't like to give it credit for it. That's what it's doing. And that's why I didn't do that exact or opposite match, because I don't want it to. I want it to find it itself. And what it naturally does is find that closest value to it and pull there.
Richard, could you hover over that formula that you finished in that B
Yep.
column so I could see it? Where's the formula? Oh, there it
Right
is.
here. So it's VLOOKUP,
Something
comma, or VLOOKUP open parentheses,
in- oh,
$ B, $2, comma, D2, colon, F7, and that's your range. That's saying D2 through F7, comma 3, which is the column, comma column. Say that 4 times fast. It's the column you are pulling the information from, which is that F column. So that's the third column in our table. And then I close my argument. And it gives me the 28%. So let's say we say the person makes, 60,000. So if I do 60,000, it's going to pull at 36% because it's looking at that value and pulling in that range. All right. So if you don't put true for range lookup, that's the same as putting false. Nope. If you put true, it forces it to look for the exact matches, and forces it to look for matches, and sometimes it'll go to the lowest value depending on what you put. So if you leave it off, it doesn't do exact or approximate, it looks at ranges, right? So it'll go to that. So it's tricking the system in a sense. If you put true, it's going to force it to do a certain something, and it may not work every time. Okay. All right. So I got about 10 more minutes, and there was something else I wanted to show you that might be better. We'll do the H lookup, and that'll be the last part for today, because I think we've got like 10 minutes left. So H lookup it's the same thing, but what it's doing is pulling horizontally, right? So the H lookup looks at what lookup value am I looking at? What's the table? What's the row index instead of the column? So the column is vertical, the row is horizontal. So it's saying, what row do you want me to pull from? So let's practice a little bit with the H lookup. Same exact concept, except we're using H lookup instead of V lookup. I'm going to type equals H lookup, open parentheses. So again, in this particular thing, it's the same concept as it was in the previous example, except your table is horizontal instead of vertical. So if your table goes left and right, H lookup is what you're going to look for. If your table goes vertically, it's going to be the vertical concept that you're looking for, the V lookup. So our lookup value is again in B2. It's saying, what do you want me to look up in this table? So B2, again, if you're not going to copy it, you don't have to make it absolute. I do absolute cell references as a practice, a natural practice, because if you've got several formulas in a spreadsheet, it's probably good not to have to go through all of them and look at it again. So I just go ahead and make that an absolute cell reference. A shortcut to that is, you just saw me do that really quickly, is you hit the F4 key and it will automatically do both those $ for you. If I hit the F4 again, it just puts it in front of the row and then the $ in the column. So it's like a toggle switch. So F4 is that shortcut to make that absolute. I'm going to do a comma to move to the next argument. And my next argument is, what's the table range that we're looking at? So again, it's cell E2 or E1, I'm sorry, E1 through J3. E1 through J3. And Maribel, as we said earlier, you can name that range if you choose to. comma, and now instead of the column we're looking in, so we're not doing it vertically anymore, it's asking me what row do you want me to look in? So again, the tax rate is in the third row, 1, 2, 3. So my answer will be 3 here. And we again want it to look at those ranges, so we don't do true or false. And we close that parentheses to end the argument. And it's telling me 28% for 21,000, which is in between this range. So let's just make up another one, say 51,348. So it's in the 31 range, right? Does that make sense? Okay, so I'm going to stop here because if we get into other stuff, we're going to be here till 1:30. We'll continue. I'll do another one and we'll work on index matching and grade lookups and stuff. But I want to stop here sharing and just ask you, are there any questions? Do you have any questions related to V or H lookup that we just went over?
I do. Does it make a difference if it's alpha or numeric?
No.
No, okay.
No. Again, it's pulling characters. It's just pulling what you tell it to pull. All right. Anybody else with H or V lookup? All right. So any other questions on Excel, period? Because we've got about 7 minutes left. Anything on Excel that you want to know that maybe I can tell you possibly and answer those questions? Sandy, I have a question for you. Did at any point is in the weeds on your piece of paper?
No,
I've accomplished it all.
but my spreadsheets now have highlighted yellow areas where the correct formula.
See, there is, and I do want to show you guys, if you're on a spreadsheet, and I'm looking it up right now to try to find it. If you're on a spreadsheet that someone else has created, I just want to show you this little trick. If you're on a spreadsheet that someone else has created and you don't have any idea what formulas they've used, and you don't want to click on every cell and see if there's a formula in that cell, if you'll go to the formula tab, there is a button called show formulas. And when you click it, it exaggerally goes all over and makes it bigger, but it shows you where every single formula is. And then you can turn it right back off and make it go back to normal. That is a quick way to read a formula spreadsheet. If someone else has created it, they may have left, they may have not shared all the information with you, and you just need to look at where that cell is. You also have, and I can't show you on this particular spreadsheet because I didn't set it up, but there's also a button, there's 2 buttons up there that say trace precedence and trace dependence. And what that does is it shows arrows, and you'll see it on my screen. It shows it. The precedent means something before on which something stands, and dependence is on whatever it's dependent. Something is depending on that. So what it'll show you is it shows arrows that indicate which cells affect the value of that currently used cell. So if you're trying to see, okay, I changed this value and everything else on the spreadsheet's changing for some reason, then if you click precedence, it's going to show you everything that cell is relying on. And if you click dependence, it's going to show you arrows to point to every cell that is depending on that one. So it's guiding you through that spreadsheet so you can figure out what people have done when they've created formulas. I hope that makes sense. All right.
That's
Well,
very
Steve,
useful.
Steve, it's so nice of you to join us.
Hi,
Do you
Steve.
know that if you join this class in the middle and you don't know what's going on, it sounds like you guys are landing airplanes.
Oh, wow.
I had no idea. It was funny. I went from a workshop on reproductive justice to an intermediate Excel spreadsheet. Interesting day.
I like it.
Would have been easier.
I'm not sure.
And Steve, we have started plugging that we are going to be sending out information for our January 12th workshop. That is a 4-hour, and we have not stopped recording. So y'all hear this over and over and over again on a loop. It is 4 hours of intense training, and I planned to leave an hour for like almost like a lab. So if you have questions about something from your organization that you're trying to develop or something, that last hour could be, let's see how this would work for us.
Mm.
So this is really, really imperative for you to join if you really want to do it.
Will you be covering like Microsoft Money? Or are you doing the apps associated with Microsoft?
Now
Is
say
that-
that, am I covering Microsoft what?
Like Microsoft Money?
Are you talking about like Dynamics?
It's an app, I think, that's free from Microsoft.
Yeah,
It's like a version of QuickBooks.
no.
No,
I might could put a blurb in there if you want it. But Microsoft Money is probably a 2-day training in and of itself. Yeah. So there's a lot. This is not the end of our relationship, y'all. Crystal, turn the recording off so I can actually say something and not be committed for the rest of my life.